Anyway, it is what it is. Good morning, Kirsten Holder. So
Morning.
fabulous to have you here today to talk to me about soul.
Thank you
Um,
very much.
so I thought what I'd do is do a little bit of an intro so people know who you are. This is Kirsten Holder. I've known Kirsten for about 4 or 5 years now, mainly on LinkedIn and Twitter. Um, Kirsten is the owner of Kickstart Development, and she's been running her own business since 2006. Prior to that, she worked in the NHS and still manages large contracts for leadership development and coaching with a range of big clients, including people like Nestle and the NHS too. Um, so I'm Jane. For those that don't know me, I run Peak Potential, also a coach. Without further ado, let's get on to the meaty stuff because we've got lots to say and a lot to cram in into our short time together. So I called out for some help, I guess, from collaborations across LinkedIn and Twitter. And Kirsten very kindly said, oh, yeah, let's have a chat. And what's come out from that is really our both our passion around soul, a soul at work. And what does that mean? So what I did first of all was have a look at a little bit of a definition of soul and then look at how it's being used currently at work. So the definition, these are the two bits that stand out for me. Although I also saw another post that said there's 25 definitions of soul. So you can
God,
imagine, I know. So this is probably why we're not sure what it is. So these are the two that kind of stood out for me, and these were kind of like the Oxford English Dictionary definitions, if you like. So one is our essence, or immaterial part of a human being, which I thought was quite nice. And the other one was the emotional or intellectual energy or intensity that is revealed about a human being through art or artistic performance. I just thought I'd hold those there in space for us to think about because they are quite interesting definitions. Having said that, when I looked and delved into a little bit about, okay, so what does well-being at work mean and what's being done so far, the 5 pillars that come up for well-being, which are emotional, social, digital, financial, and another one, physical, don't actually include the soul at all. So this is going to make for a really interesting exploration, I think, Kirsten. And so I'm going to shut up for a little bit now and just hand over to you and say, well, what does soul mean to you?
it's really interesting, and I was really intrigued seeing the like mind, body, soul. You know, when you talked about in your sort of wellbeing stuff, and thinking, well, actually, I've got a really good understanding of the mind stuff, and there's lots of material and work around that, and certainly about physical and health and all of that in terms of wellbeing. But soul stuff feels like something that we know is important and we know what it feels like if it isn't there. So I sort of went immediately to, so what soul must say? So I sort of know if I go into a soulless place or, from an inner place that feels like it doesn't have any soul, then that's a really strong feeling. But to try and describe then what soul is as an organisation or as a person in an organisation felt so much harder to get my sort of hands around. And I started to think about it, different words that came into my mind, I guess, when I was thinking about it. And there was definitely something around nurture and nurturing the soul almost. I was sort of thinking
That's really weird, Kirsten. Sorry to jump in there because I was thinking about nourishing. So that's the word that popped into my head when I was thinking about it. So I just thought I'd throw that in because that nurture and nourishment, there's something there. It's very maternal, isn't it? And I wondered actually, is there something gendered about soul? And is that why it's not being talked about in organisations?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, interesting. It made me think that it's so weird that we've done the like nurturing and nourishing thing, but I was thinking about like if I was going out for walk, I can just go out for walk. I can just be like, right, shoes on, need to get there, walk, and that's it. The only thing I need to do is get somewhere. Or I can, go for a walk with friends and family, we can chat at the same time. Or I can go for a walk for more of an exercise, and I'm focusing on trying to get a heart rate or trying to walk in a certain way. Or I can go for a walk to, feel restorative or relaxing. And maybe think about the same thing in terms of business, that it is the soul around how we do stuff. So it's not this intervention brings soul in, but it's like we can either just get there, or we can have a range of different things that we can access along the way that suit us at particular times.
Yes. Yeah, I really love that. Interestingly, I've got Sherry Brenton. I don't know if you know Sherry. She's kindly written a blog for tomorrow's Wellbeing Wednesday on walking. and and some of what you were saying there was really interesting. So that and there was a loads of words popping into my head, and I think the whole point of this is that I should have said it at the beginning, really, we've got no answers to this, have we?
Not soul experts.
It's just going to make for a really interesting exploration as to, is it important, actually, generally speaking, for lives and well-being? If so, why don't we pay more attention to it? And actually, yes, how on earth do you then operationalize? I don't know if that's the right word, or make something of that inside organizations, if it's necessary at all? Because actually, who knows?
I was going to say, or is the point at which you try and do that, does that almost like remove what's important about? Do you know what I mean? Is it something that you try and structure and plan for, or is it something that, I don't know, there's like a word?
Oh, Kirsten. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go on. I just got really excited then, because I was actually thinking about music.
Yeah.
And you know how it's like that. It's the difference between the jazz from the heart stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that contrived boy band stuff. Sorry, boy band listeners. But to me, they're so obviously different. Now, that's not to say that boy bands haven't got heart and soul going into it. They may do, but it's just how it comes across, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or like you say, because you try to force a structure on it, you lose some of the essence. Getting back to the definition.
Yeah.
And the heart, I don't know.
I think, and it's interesting that when I was a bit like you, I thought, all right, I'll Google soul. And, I looked at images and sort of saw what images come up. And it was yoga and sort of like holistic dream world kind of stuff. And I was like, that's really interesting, because I don't necessarily know what my definition is, but it's more than that. I don't immediately go soul, and I love yoga. I don't necessarily go soul. Oh yes, it must be dream world or yoga. But what it does feel like to me is individual. It feels like what would make a workplace soulful for me, or nurturing or nourishing or whatever, will be different to you. And that's the bit, I guess, around, if you try and place a load of structure around it, actually, is it that discovery element of, at certain moments, different things will be important to me, and a workplace should enable me to bring with me or access those things at different times. And I've got a lovely, I'm a bit like interested in images and stuff. So I found this one. And I don't know why I liked it, especially. It was just one, so I thought, don't think about it too much. Just, you've been there's something that stood out to me when I looked at it. But it reminded me of the Emotional Bank Account by Stephen Covey, which I absolutely love. And I was looking at this, and it immediately made me think about, this has almost been like an organisation, actually being an organisation, and that each individual in that organisation brings something of themselves. And that's not about you have to reveal everything about yourself when you're at work, but you bring something, whether that's a skill or an element of your personality or an experience or an emotion or whatever. And those individual things help to build up the organisation. And this is where I think that like nourishing, nurturing thing comes in, that we all have some responsibility to feed that. You know, if somebody shares something or needs help, we have a responsibility in that organisation to respond to that as human beings. So we're each responsible for caring for that organisation. But also that organisation is then filled with a well that we can draw on when we need to. And I talk about bank accounts in terms of team bank accounts, that you deposit things as a team, so that on those really tough days you have things that you can draw from as a team to give you, a bit of strength or brightness or whatever. And I really liked this image for that. Anyway, I've talked a lot, but that really
No, it's beautiful. I kind of like the connection to nature there, because to me there's something about soul and our place in the world, or our life force, if you like. And I guess that's where it gets a little bit intangible for work. And then I guess I went down the rabbit hole slightly of, well, is soul different to purpose or culture? So can you actually feel the soul of an organization when you go in? I mean, I describe mine as if we look back to the energy bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think StrengthScope does this well, because they talk about where do you get your energy from as an individual? What are your strengths that fire you up? So I think as individuals, we do have some tools and things around us that can enable us to think about that in a work context. I'm wondering if they translate as well once we start kind of layering out. And yeah, once we get very, very big, I mean, it's that challenge again, when an organization gets big, does it lose its soul? Because there's almost nowhere for all the individual souls to kind of be held. I don't know if that's the right phrase.
But I wonder whether that's because at that point, is there a feeling that the organisation must create and direct it? It's almost the organisation's responsibility then to, inject soul or provide soul, and that's not how I see it. I think that's why that picture resonated, that actually it's enabling everybody that works for that organisation to be able to bring something of themselves, and then combined, those provide the soul of the organisation. But you can't go, so here's our policy on injecting soul. But I did see you shared a lovely article for our conversation today.
Oh, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Sorry, that's just made me laugh, Kirsten. Yeah, you can imagine that actually happening.
Yeah, like, 5 attributes of soul. Smile as you walk down the corridor. But there's
go on. Yeah,
a lovely quote in that article you sent, which was, each person is a someone, not a something.
Oh.
And like that, I think if you could have how do you maybe create the environment where it, soul can emerge in an organisation, or however we want to frame it? That for me is like a starting point. Is how does it feel like each person is a someone, not something?
I love that. And I guess as well, we like to kind of have a bit more of a deeper exploration on this over Twitter, wouldn't we? And have host a Twitter chat about this. And I'm just wondering, that question that you've posed there around how can we help soul emerge within our organizations? Because I think that there must be some, what would, I guess, I'm putting the contrary hat on here, and this is not my thinking at all, but I can almost hear the people in the background. Well, what's the ROI of that? I think I've already probably just told you what I think about that through the way I've delivered that question. But I'm sure there are benefits though, that may be not necessarily easy to measure, but just because it's the right thing to do, that because it makes us feel like we belong. There's a belonging thing to this, to me, as well. You know, if we can bring our hearts, minds and souls to the workplace, that's surely got to feel better than leaving it at the door as we go in.
Yeah. And I think you're right. There's always a challenge around some of those things in how do you determine the benefit of them, whether that's financially or organisational or whatever. And it's interesting that saying that very phrase to you, just the other thing that was like happening in my brain at the moment is sometimes though, isn't it just the right thing to do? Whether we can find a financial organisational benefit for it or not, sometimes is it just the right thing to do? And I guess you can equate that to lots of things, can't you? Whether, you know, I don't know, if I'm driving my car and I, you know, let a couple of people out into the queue, you know, do I see the benefit of that? You know, not necessarily. It might have made my journey a bit slower, but actually, is that just part of being, you know?
And yes, I think there is a benefit to that, because I think, and maybe I need to dig out some reports on altruism, but I think we are hardwired to be kind, actually, and to care for others. When we don't get enough opportunities to do that, I think that's what then starts to erode things like mental health. And we are cut off a lot at the moment. So, you know, is soul going to become more important through COVID? We know that we're probably going to be seeing a well-being crisis after this. And if we're not talking about soul and the very, very, it's the very innards of us, isn't it? And I don't really, again, it's that, it's our life force. If we're not talking about that now, is there going to be a gap in the way in which we support people moving forward? Who knows?
I think about almost about the moments perhaps which might be about soul is like the sort of breath out. So, you know, in an organisation, you know, are there moments when you can breathe out, and whether that's just, you know, being able to access a space that's different, or, you know, everything not being so rigid that, you know, there's no time for, you know, discovery or growth, or, you know, nobody asks your opinion, so there's never any chance to share what you think. So I think it's like that, those moments where you can sort of breathe out in an organisation and have some choice about what you do. But also, I'm being a very good student here. I read your article and I even highlighted it.
Oh,
right, I know. So there's another lovely quote in there, and it's exactly what we're just talking about. And it's what counts is what gets counted, and what really counts can't be counted. And I absolutely love that. And it's the stuff that I talk about as you when I'm sharing businesses as well, which is, you know, very often, you know, your organisations are going to come to you and say, you know, can you now give us some evidence of how you build trust in your team, please? Yeah, that's not necessarily going to be one of your KPIs, but you know, if you don't, it's going to be really hard to meet all of the other stuff that your organisation may want to do. And that's where the soul stuff fits more, I think.
Yeah, and that breathing out as well is so powerful when you kind of look at that inspire, aspire, you know, it's all kind of wrapped in about how we think about it, well, creativity, really.
Yeah.
If we haven't got the space to think, to breathe, we need space.
Express.
We need space, actually, just to allow something new to come in. You know, if we're too busy operating from the kind of head down, a kind of amygdala, get this done, you know, fear-based stuff, we need to be operating from here, that very abundant, as you say, that breathful, open space to
Yeah.
have better conversations, to collaborate, to just to feel the nature around us, to feel that we are actually part of something. When we start to kind of, I think, cut ourselves off, if you like, when we start to become, I don't know if I've got the words for it, Kirsten. I get a sense of it squishing people in. Is, that
Yeah.
uh,
And I've just written down that holding your breath. Yeah,
ah,
I've just written down, if I go into somewhere, whether it's like a shop or, somewhere, and I don't know if you've ever experienced that, you go in and it's like, I need to go out now, because there's just something about it, whether it's that, nobody's made any eye contact with you, or there's an abruptness or a rudeness as soon as you walk in, or whatever. But it's almost like, right, I'm holding my breath till I get out. I don't want to breathe out here. I don't want to stay any longer than I need to. And then I was just thinking about what makes, an organisation feel soulless. And I guess also, is it just, I'm holding my breath till I can go home? When I go home, I can be new, and I can breathe out and do all the things that are important to me. And
reminds me of a coaching client that I used to have. I won't disclose, but it was we'd always meet in a room which had no windows and had flies. It had these tiny flies everywhere, and it was almost like an analogy for the place she was working in. But it's so important. And actually, do we notice our own environments, and what they might be telling us about how we matter, actually, and what we might need, what we might need to ask for. You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So, because I just observed it and noticed it, and she was like, she was very quick to move along, and I thought that was quite interesting. And what are we allowing to happen under our noses?
Yeah, and I think it's not about flash spaces or like smart spaces. I've worked with some organisations who, maybe charities, or maybe organisations that have got very little in terms of extra financial cash,
Yeah.
but there's massive soul there, and actually it's that feeling of like richness comes from the people within the organisation. It's, don't get me wrong, that it might be nice to have loads of other stuff, but actually there's a fulfilment, a nourishment that comes from the people. And I've also worked in and been in places that have been the smartest, most beautifully designed, and I can't wait to get out.
I know exactly, most lawyer practices, to be honest. That sounds really mean. I don't mean that, lawyers, honestly, but there is something very, some scrubbed, for within an inch of its life, and it's almost like they've scrubbed this very soul out of it. There's nothing human there, almost. Yeah, we've veered off, which I knew we would, into environment, which is always fascinating, isn't it? But there's so many different aspects to soul, and I think this is the point, isn't it? And I'm just going to keep a track of time for us as well, Kirsten, because I know we can talk.
Yeah.
So if you had to, so I'm just thinking about, yes, definitely want to do this as a tweet up and explore it in more depth, because, and it might be more than one. Who knows? Maybe we have a soul morning or something.
Ooh,
once a month to check in.
More than soul music, just like.
Yes, quite, with some funky tunes. Sorry, I didn't bring the tunes today. It took me all my time to work out Zoom. So yeah, I mean, are there any kind of key insights or any messages that you kind of like to leave the listeners with, I guess, around this topic? Because I mean, I just think it's almost like a Pandora's box, isn't it, of things to further think about. So yeah, I wondered what your thoughts were.
I guess there's something around what would make a workplace feel, maybe using those words like, fulfilling or nourishing or whatever. What would asking perhaps the people that work in your organisation what it would feel like if it was, a fulfilling place to come to work or a nourishing place to come to work. I think there's also something about how you do that at a local level. So to me, I think when I see organisations working really well, it's the teams within that organisation that are working really well, and then collectively that creates this lovely energy. So I think it's not about an organisation creating the soul strategy necessarily. It's about having a conversation around some of that. But I think it's also thinking as an individual, what can I bring to my team? Or what does our team need in order to feel like perhaps it's got that picture, what are the things that we need to sort of hang on that tree that make us feel good about being here, that we can sort of draw on when, we're having those moments that aren't so good. And then also the last thing, and this isn't like a silly that I've thought about before, but there's definitely something about those breakout moments. And that relates to loads of stuff. I think about, having the opportunity to do stuff at work that isn't just, head down, hold your breath. That is where that's about a chance to see other people and spend time together, or go for a walk together, or feel like you matter and you've got a voice. None of that is in any way at all articulated very well.
Actually, I disagree. Actually, I think that's really well articulated. And I'm because I started out saying, well, these are the 5 pillars of well-being that tend to be organised or looked at from an organisational perspective. And actually, from what you've just said there, I thought, yeah, there are some lines to it. So some of it is perhaps the social, some of it is actually about the physical activity, maybe getting outside, what have you. Or even the emotional, how do I feel? Can I breathe? That kind of thing. So I think they are there. And maybe it's just in the fabric of those pillars, or how the foundation of those pillars. There's a soul there somewhere, but it's not being talked about, and that for me is interesting. And I think, lastly, and I'm just as a last point, I guess, is we talk about culture. I think in organisations, and that feels quite dry to me, and quite L&D-y, if you know what I mean. It sounds like a business word. It's the culture here, perhaps, I don't know, but we don't talk about soul, and I wonder why that is. Still, are we missing something by not engaging in our own souls? And it's made me wonder, how much time do I spend with my soul, actually?
And actually, I think that's such an interesting question to even start to ask, isn't it? And it's just making me think, what about if we change that word around? So when you talk about, what is the culture here? What's the soul like around here? Or, how differently that conversation might go, or how differently you might look at things. And I think it comes back to that culture often comes with, well, then there are things we need to do, to make that culture happen, or to, create that culture. And some of this feels like it's actually removing some of that. It's helping people to have the space to build some of that themselves, not to, not to create the soul strategies.
Well, perfect. I'm just, it's back to the energy, isn't it? And back to
Yeah.
that energy and that life force stuff. And yeah, do we talk about that? I don't know. Lots of questions. I knew we'd have loads more questions to ask, actually, Kirsten.
I can't wait to do like a little sort of tweet hour or something on this and just see what, you know, because as you say, neither of us are, you know, are experts on this. This was just an interesting topic that we wanted to chat about, and I'm so intrigued to see what people say.
What would you like to call it if we're going to do a tweet up in a true collaborative sense? I don't have to have all the ideas here.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Like the little tweeter, what could you call it?
So what's the hashtag?
Food for the soul.
Oh, soul food. Thinking that might be quite long. Food for
Yeah, yeah.
Soul food.
Hashtag. Or what was that? Soul food.
Which is a bit like what you said, but just shorter.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Soul at work.
Well. Yeah, go on. Soul at work. I like soul food, but I don't know whether then that. Mind you, might just get loads of nice recipes. I mean, that would not be no good thing, would it? So.
Which is our other favourite topic,
yeah,
isn't
exactly,
it?
Yeah, the conversation we have is about food.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you have any additional last insights? Thanks. So we'll do a soul at work. I'm just trying to think when that might happen. Maybe we'll compare diaries and just get a sense out there.
Sometimes probably in the next couple of weeks or whatever.
When people might like to do that. But I think that'd be a fantastic. It's great to get some additional voices, and I'm quite happy to host some more talking heads as well. It would be great.
Yeah,
really, I really enjoyed talking to you about this.
Maybe that's it. Hashtag soul chat. Well, that's
what was that? Sorry.
Soul chat.
Soul chat.
Hashtag soul chat.
Oh, lovely.
It takes a while for it to, warm up.
Excellent. Love it. Well, on that note, I shall bid you adieu and stop recording, and hopefully this has all worked out well. This will be a test of my technical skills. And I'll just say now, this sort of thing, the technical aspect doesn't feed my soul, but hopefully we'll get there. Well, take care, and it's been lovely to talk to you, Kirsten.
Fantastic. And you, Jane. Bye.
Take care. Bye.